Hi, I'm Annabelle Gray, and I'm a senior product designer on Create Code Review. And today I'm going to talk about beautifying our UI with feature flags, shipping without prioritization, without issues, and without prototypes. It's a little bit of a misleading title because there were, in fact, a few issues and designs, but as a whole, it kind of works. So the way we worked in 15.0 for our Beautifying UI initiative was in this big issue where we just kind of brain dumped all of the ideas that we were thinking of. And a lot of people kind of chimed in because I posted it in a few different meetings. If anyone has any ideas that they want to work on or that they want fixed in this milestone, please post it and maybe we'll get to it. We did end up fixing quite a few small things, but as we continued posting here, the ideas kind of got bigger and bigger, and workflows were beginning to be kind of affected in a bigger way than we had originally thought. So we wanted to continue working in this way and ship these changes that we were passionate about. But without that research, without the prototypes, and without the prioritization, we weren't necessarily super confident about how these changes would be received. So luckily, the engineer I was paired with, Phil, is really great and quick and efficient at feature flagging things. So there are three changes I'm going to walk through that we did put under feature flags, and then I'm going to talk about the pros and cons of working in this way and what the next steps are. So the first change that we worked on was the Diff file expansion, and this is a little bit, I did do some designs for this prior, but it was tricky to research because when you're looking at a merge request and you're reviewing the changes, it's tricky to create a prototype that accounts for all of the different things that can happen when you're reviewing. Some people need, depending on the file size, depending on the file type and the changes, you don't know what you're going to do in terms of expanding and trying to see what else exists in that file. It's hard to do in a prototype, and it's hard to do in a questionnaire. This was something that I really wanted to change and something that Phil also wanted to change. So he just built it according to the design specs, and we released it under feature flag to GitLab, GitLab org, GitLab. I opened a feedback issue and kind of acted on the, so the feedback issue that came back, this is the design that we ended up going with. It was a little more intuitive to understand what's going to happen when you click one of these arrows, if it's going to show down or up. It also reduces some of the clutter, and it increased the contrast to show what isn't actually part of the changes. So in this case, you can see the buttons are repeated every time. And without the placement, it's kind of tricky to tell what's going to happen when you click those. So the feedback issue that was opened, which I have here, was mostly positive. Some of the most interesting negative feedback came from the tech writing team, which was incredibly valuable. And I say negative, but it was super useful, and it was very valuable because two huge pieces of information came out of it that I didn't necessarily consider. And because of that, we've opened new issues. So that was kind of one of the interesting things about using a feature flag, was getting specific feedback from a team that I didn't necessarily expect. But the rest of the feedback was pretty good. And once we address those issues, we can have a more cohesive experience for everyone that uses GitLab. The second sort of bigger change that we worked on was the merge request header. This evolved over many comments in this issue, but the gist of it is that it used to look like this. And we ended up moving all the branch information to the top. We moved the checkout instructions and the open it in Git pod and everything into this code dropdown. We updated the badge styling, and we updated the unresolved thread counter so you could traverse up and down instead of just next. And then as a result of that, we were able to completely remove the merge widget, which was excellent because that merge widget, the branch widget could appear in a different place. For those of you who don't know, this is what I'm talking about. This appeared right below the description, and depending on how long this description was, it could technically appear in a different place from merge request to merge request. The third change that is still kind of in progress as far as feedback goes is the sidebar. The sidebar appearing across all tabs was something I really wanted to change. And the idea was just to remove the sidebar from any tab that was not the overview. When we did that though, the entire page shifted when you move to any other tab, which was just not an ideal experience. We knew that it wasn't ideal already. We'd already gotten feedback from that when we changed the changes tab to fluid 8 months ago. So we knew that people didn't like tab shifting. We needed to fix that. So we ended up with a design that looked like this. The sidebar was moved into the overview tab itself instead of floating on the side. And then it doesn't appear on the commits and changes tab. This feedback I knew was going to be vital because this is a huge change. And so we released it only to the GitLab project once again, opened a feedback issue, which from my last count has like 90 different comments on it, I think. 97. So yeah, the feedback from that has been very vocal and useful actually, but for a change like this, the feature flag was fantastic, not only because we were able to test it in real environment, but I don't know where I was going with that actually, so forget that I just said that. So now I'm going to move on to the pros and cons of using feature flags. The pros were with that we got to receive immediate feedback from power users, and by power users I mean GitLab team members. We use GitLab in a way that few organizations probably do. We spend pretty much all of our days inside GitLab fixing it, inside the merge requests and issues and everything like that. So the feedback was very specific and mostly good and actionable. And we were able to test it in that real environment. So we didn't have to spend time creating many prototypes to sort of figure out and mimic the way someone might work. And yeah, it also decreased the time for design to create those complicated prototypes. On the flip side, that just shifted all of the work basically onto the developers. So they had to actually build the feature. And unfortunately, they also had to build it in a way that is a little trickier than usual because it was behind a feature flag. Maintaining, and this is now going into the drawbacks and the cons, but maintaining those feature flags are kind of a giant pain. You have to add so much extra code. And as an example of that, you need to kind of keep track of it and then remove it all eventually. So this is a merge request to remove the updated header feature flag, and it's 21 changes, and you can see all the things that then have to be removed and kept track of while you're working. When it comes to the sidebar specifically, we had to build this sidebar while also not touching or affecting the existing merge request sidebar or any of the other sidebars that are shared between all the issuables, which include alerts, vulnerabilities, and issues and epics. So that was kind of tricky. And then depending on who and which projects we're rolling these changes out to, behind that feature flag, we're only getting feedback from GitLab team members and a few passionate community members. We use GitLab in such a specific way that not all the feedback necessarily pertains to the greater community and all GitLab users. An example of that would be our use of labels. We typically use like 10 to 20 labels per merge request, whereas the average for other organizations is something around 2 to 3. So yeah, overall, super valuable way to work. And I think that if the developer has the time to build out these features, then using feature flags in this way is a really great way to get immediate feedback, especially if you're just not confident about these changes, and building a prototype isn't necessarily the most feasible path for certain workflow related changes. Yeah, I think that's it. Are there any questions?